Welcome to episode 203 of the Band Hive Podcast. It is time for another episode of the Band Hive Podcast. My name is James Cross, and I help independent artists tour smart. This week on the show, I have a very special guest, Derek Flores of Ethun. How's it going today, Derek?
Going great, man.
I'm glad to hear that. It's a pleasure to have you here. And today we are going to nerd out about booking. And specifically, Derek, I want to shout out for anybody who doesn't know you. You are in a band, a solo project band, but you also used to promote shows, a lot of shows, and I'm sure you still do some.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've ever had a promoter on the show before. So today we're going to dive into tips from both perspectives, because there's so many things that frustrate promoters and artists just have no idea about, because it's not the kind of thing promoters talk about.
Yeah.
So I'm really stoked to get into that with you.
Oh, we talk about it, just not to bands.
Oh, yeah. We were just before the episode talking about, I think it's an Instagram page, agent versus promoter. Bands, go check that out and learn from the other bands' mistakes. Or learn from your own mistakes if you see like a screenshot of an email you sent on there. That's the nightmare. You go on that page, you're like, wait, that's us. They blacked out the name, but I wrote that email. It's such a funny page. Before we jump into all that, though, Derek, can you share a little bit about your background as an artist and a promoter? How did you get started in the music business?
When I was like 17, I started joining local bands, and I was in between bands. And I was like, well, I still want to be involved somehow, but I'm not playing music. And a buddy of mine was a promoter who had booked everybody you could think of, from Upon a Burning Body, Impending Doom, Sleeping with Sirens. And he was a close friend of mine. So he's like, hey, why don't you just come hang out with me while I throw this show and you can help me out? And over time, I was like, wow, there's a lot into what goes into throwing shows. I thought you just like show up and the thing's done. He goes, no, this is like a business. This is how I make my living. I was like, you know what? I think I could do this. This looks like a lot of fun. I think I could do this. And as time went on, I was like, I can't do this. I was like, I can totally do this, which is every promoter's struggle is I have no clue what I'm doing and no one knows they're doing more than I am.
I love that. And that's the music business as a whole. Everybody has their way to do it, and anything else is wrong. I fall into that same trap. You'll hear me rant on Band Hive. I'm sure you've heard many of these rants.
I've heard of, yeah.
Yeah, I'll be ranting about something, and generally it's the kind of stuff that pisses off most people. But there's going to be that one person that goes, no, that's exactly how you should do it. I want you to do it that way.
It's usually me.
I love it.
It's usually me, like, no, he's right. He's always right.
That's too good. You can just comment next time you see it, be like, do the opposite. Do the opposite.
Going to.
Oh, I love it.
The funny thing about booking is that if you're a band reaching out to a booker or promoter, there's no right way to do it, but there's 1,000 wrong ways to do it.
Oh, 100%. Somebody the other day commented on one of my videos and said that all of my TikToks are negative and he wants to see more positive. My reaction was like, check out the podcast. There's so much there. And I realized later that it's the algorithm is showing the ones where I rant. Those end up being more popular. But the thing is, it's also because to teach people how to do things the right way, you have to teach them what not to do.
I have a friend who he wanted to get into booking, how it worked. And I kept telling him like, well, this is usually how things run. And he's like, well, it sounds like you just hate local bands and you're very cynical about the scene as a whole. I'm like, dude, no. One, you've never done a show ever. Two, I've been doing this for like 10 years. Trust me, the things I'm telling you are not to discourage you. They're literally to show you where I messed up in the past. And I'll be the first to tell you every time I messed up. And he's like, you're cynical and you hate the scene and therefore I hate you. I'm like, I don't care.
I can relate to that so much. Like, I did a video about this recently, and this is totally off topic, but talking about the victim mentality. Basically saying like, artists have all the knowledge in the world, but they don't want it because they want to be the victim. And like, I know I'm generalizing here. I know not every band is like this. I know a lot of great bands that aren't like that. But those are also the ones that happen to succeed because they're like, hey, we're not going to be idiots. We're going to go do the thing right. And we're going to avoid the mistakes that so many local bands make.
Sometimes larger bands. I worked with this one hardcore band that did like European tours. They were legends in their own right. I'm not going to name them because I hate them and I don't want to give them more promotion. But I walk in and I'm like, hey, here's the catering, here's everything. They're like, he's vegan, he's vegetarian. I'm like, well, your agent never sent a writer over. Like, well, you should have known. And I'm like, go f*** yourself. How about no?
I'm vegan, and the first thing I do when I book any type of gig, if it's like an all-day thing, I'm just like, is there catering? And if so, I'm vegan. It's that easy. Like, all they would have to do is like 2 days before send a message, be like, hey, we know you're doing catering. We need vegan food.
It's that easy.
Yeah. And some people would say it's on you to ask, But ultimately, if they don't tell you anything about what they want, why would you ask? You're just going to give them what you always do for every other band.
Little Caesar's Pizza.
Very nice. Hey, if you get it cheeseless, it's vegan. Their crust and their sauce are vegan. At least they were last time I checked, which was like 6 years ago. So, because we don't have Little Caesars around here. This was when I lived in SoCal. Anyway, so that's a really cool history on the promoter side. You said you were between bands. So something sparked your interest in music. Is there like a certain artist who inspired you to get into the music scene, or some like moment in your life where like, this is what I want to do?
It was Kiss.
No way. Nice. Paul Stanley, and just like, he's the guy.
Yeah, I walked to my family's like guest room and the TV was on mute. And I was like, those guys just look cool. Oh my God, there's fire too. Oh crap, that's cool. It's on mute. I'm already interested. I think you've done a podcast about that too, about how visual aesthetic is the first thing people notice.
200 episodes in, it's kind of blurry now in my mind about what we've covered and what we haven't. But yeah, that's a great point. And like, I do remember talking at some point about, you don't have to go out and have a look like Kiss, but you have to look appropriate for the genre. If you look like a flannel wearing redneck, you're not going to fit in with the emo scene. Now, to be fair, the punk and emo scene here is full of flannel wearing not rednecks.
In 2016, you could.
Yeah. Or if you listen to 4 Years Strong.
That's funny, 'cause that was actually what was in my head when I said that.
Nice. Well, clearly they went down in history.
True.
So that's your history in music. You got started with Kiss. You played in some bands. You started promoting shows. What are you up to right now?
Well, right now, Ethun Hogg would just put out Green Light. We're really doing more of a soft launch of the brand, which, is fine. I think bands should, to an extent, do soft launches. I don't think like your first release should be your big foray out, but you should find a way to curate how you're releasing things. And right now, that's what we're in the process of doing, is finding a way to properly curate things so we have a waterfall of content coming out at all times.
I love that.
Yeah, last thing we want is people to gain interest and be like, well, what now? Why is this on pause? The ride just started. Why is it slowing down?
Yeah, why is there no content for weeks at a time? That's one of the most frustrating things. This goes back to, there's lots of right ways to do it. There's a wrong way to do it. And that is not ever posting on social media. It doesn't necessarily have to be new music, but as long as you're putting out something that's relevant to your band, I would stay away from memes.
Even if it's a meme-ish, fine. But don't become a meme page that just happens to occasionally pump out music.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about the ratio. You want to keep content focused on your music, but if you share something funny once in a while, people are going to enjoy that. That's personality, but you don't want it to be the whole personality.
Yeah, and I think in today's market, people no longer want to fall in love with the music. People now look at musicians as personalities that happen to make music. And I think with TikTok and social media, that's really where we are. So if you can find ways to promote your personality with the music simultaneously, like the way that Motley Crue did it, and All Time Low is a good example, Blink-182, you have something there. I do think people like to put sounds with certain personalities. And again, Blink-182 is a good example.
I think that's absolutely true. And also community. If people, especially in the alternative scene, find a community around a band, that will keep them invested so much longer. It's amazing to see how some bands, their community implodes and the band just shrivels up and dies. It's really sad to see.
Oh, for sure. And I think like that's why when I see bands with less than 5,000 followers not commenting or responding to people that comment on their TikToks, like the song is great. And they put like one of those like little prayer hands emoji. I'm like, you just lost a fan for life. That person goes, they think they're too cool for me. I'm done.
Yeah. And that's such low-hanging fruit. Just like interacting with people like humans.
I love interacting with people. It's awesome. But the more I post, the more I get to interact, the more the algorithm works in my favor.
Yeah, exactly. And, I'm sure you've at some point felt drained by social media, but it's still a tool that you can use. And if you use it the right way, it's going to be like 10 minutes a day. It's not that bad.
And also, like, along with Ethun Hogg, what my main job is, I'm a full-time gigging musician, like whether mostly cover bands and like hired gun work. And that still requires a lot of social media. But if you do it right, it's maybe like 20 minutes a day. You can set things like at this time, this post gets posted at this time. You can spend 30 minutes going, here's all the shit I'm going to put out for the next 2 days. Now let me set the calendar and it'll automatically post it for me. Facebook does that. I know Twitter doesn't, but that's kind of on its way out anyway.
I'm disappointed in Twitter. Let's put it that way. I use an app called Publer, which is absolutely fantastic because it works with Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and all the other ones that I don't use, like Pinterest and stuff, LinkedIn. All my posts for every episode get scheduled at once. So that's anywhere from 7 to 14 days worth of posts.
And promoters look at that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
There's times where when I was promoting where I would look at, okay, this band has maybe 20 likes. This other band has 50. But there's like 3 responses and they've responded to 2 of them that has 0 responses, which means that their community aspect will work in the show's favor. Because if someone from my scene wants to go, oh, well, they're coming down, let me check them out. Wow, this song's awesome. They'll respond, thanks, whatever. And then in my head, as a promoter, I go, okay, I can almost guarantee that person's going to buy a ticket because they've interacted. They now feel like they're a little more personally connected to the act coming down. So that's going to like go into the show.
Yeah, I think that's such a good move. And that band might not even know the person lives in the market they're about to play. They probably don't. But just interacting is such a step, like what we were talking about earlier. So I think this is a perfect point to transition into a talent buyer or promoter's tips for locals. Let's go from the top. When a band wants to reach out to you, where do they start?
There's a lot of ways to start, really. If they want to reach out, sometimes when I was in a band, what I would do is I want to go play in Houston. I find Houston music venue on Google. Then I go towards it. I'm like, okay, realistically, and this is very important, be realistic. A little self-awareness goes a long way. It's like House of Blues. I'm like, I'm not going to get booked at House of Blues. Come on, we're a baby band. That's not happening. That's out of the question. Blah, 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 bar and grill. They have shows there. Fine, let's check it out. It's all cover bands. Nope, I'm out. Maybe in the future, if I'm doing cover gigs, sure. Blah, blah, blah's Hole in the Wall, VFW, Parlor. Okay, cool. Considering maybe you're in a hardcore band. That's not uncommon. The DIY ethic is very strong in that scene. Death Kill was there 2 weeks ago. Okay, now it says Johnny Rotten Presents. Okay, let me go to Johnny Rotten Presents Facebook page or Instagram page, wherever. Contact. Or just message them directly and they'll be like, we want to go on this date on this day. And they go, cool. Now you know where to contact. It's a lot of Googling, but if you really are about it, you will do it.
There's one key thing in what you said that a lot of artists don't do. Give the promoter the date in the first contact. So many artists are like, hey, we want to play a show. And the promoter will throw like 3 dates at them. And the band says, oh, no, we can't do any of those. It's like, tell the promoter when. And that way it's just a yes or no. It's like, I have a show that night. You can hop on, or I'm not doing anything that night. Sorry.
Or sometimes we'll even be like, you know what? That's a really cool day. Nothing's going on. We will build the show around you if we feel that the investment is worth it. And you have to look at shows as investments. A lot of bands and student promoters are like, well, it's happy fun time. But it's like, no, we put a lot of money into these shows. We want our return. We want to break even. And if we can find a way to bring you here, build a show around you and get that return, we'll do it.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the biggest things too that I see is this would probably be something discussed on agent versus promoter. If agent versus promoter dealt with local bands, the amount of independent artists who have the mindset of why is the promoter taking a cut at all? It's like, because they did a bunch of work, potentially even more than the band did.
Way more. I've been on both sides, way more.
Yeah, exactly. We have this guy named Scott who puts on amazing shows. He will stand outside every punk or metal show in the area handing out handbills for weeks before a show is. And he's just doing that word of mouth marketing, handing out handbills. I'll go to a show and there's a 90% chance he's standing outside when I leave.
That's really cool.
Yeah, dude, this is totally sidetracking. He sold out 6 shows in a 94 cap bar this year in a small town, hardcore shows. The other night, there was a line down the block of people waiting to get in because it was sold out, and there were still like at least another 40 or 50 people who wanted to get in. It was amazing. And he brings through, like we had Off With Our Heads earlier this year. He brought those guys through. So it's not just locals. It's not just no-name regional bands. Like he brings in larger acts as well, and it's so cool.
I was actually going to get to that later. It's funny you mentioned that.
It's just so cool. Like he puts in the effort, and that's why these opportunities come up.
Going back to the be self-aware, when it comes to sending out offers, because as you know, we don't call them messages. It's like you send offers. That's where the business negotiation aspect takes place. There's ways to do it at different levels of band. Like I've worked with bands that are on big labels. I've worked with purely locals. And each one has its own way of sending out offers and negotiating shows. And I feel like bands need to start understanding that. That's going to sound mean, but in my scene, I think we've overly spoiled the locals to the point where if they want to go out to other markets, reality is going to hit them so much harder. And people go, oh, you're just mean. You like to crap on locals. Like, no, dude, I'm protecting you. Because if you want to go to another market, the treatment you're getting here with the way things are run here that I personally do not agree with, you're going to get a reality check and it's going to discourage you. You're going to want to like be done with it because you just don't understand how the growth works.
Yeah, absolutely. There's certain things that vary from market to market. And like you're saying, it's that reality check. And that's one of the things like why artists have to look beyond the market they're in for education. If they just ask all their friends, that's like being in a sealed bubble. They're not going to get that outside experience. And they're going to shoot themselves in the foot so easily.
That guy I was saying about earlier, that one guy that wanted to start doing shows, I had no experience, but said I was wrong about everything. I told him, like, unfortunately, as you move up the ladder, bands and their rates, how much they get paid, starts putting into draw and worth. There's a reason that Traders doesn't make as much money as Maroon 5 because of draw. They're worth more. And he goes, well, I don't want to look at bands as who's worth more and who's worth less. And I'm like, well, in the long run, you're going to be hurting the bands. If every band thinks that they can ask for exuberant amounts of money just because they exist, they're going to learn the hard way that it doesn't work like that. And now they're going to break up because they're like, well, we don't know how this is really supposed to work.
Yeah. Here's how I would frame it. Let's say the music is worth the same amount because it's subjective. We can't put a value on music, but we can put a value on the service that the band provides. And if you're a venue, that service is providing entertainment for the people that you bring. Unless if we're talking about cover bands or something, then whatever. But if you're an original band, you have to bring the people. And that is the value exchange. The venue gives you a place to play and you bring the people. You get paid for that because the venue, let's say they pay out 75% after expenses, just to put a ballpark figure on there. So they get 25% after expenses. Not a lot. And then they get the bar.
I wish it was 25.
Yeah. What do you do typically for your deals? What's your promoter cut?
For my deals, it's just based on who the band is. If you're like a no-name band coming to a new town for the first time, you have no crowd, and it's literally just we're going to experiment and see how it goes. It can be anywhere from like 50 to 25. If you've never played the market, you have maybe less than 300 followers on all platforms, you're not getting 75. And some bands will go, well, that's not fair. And it's like, dude, I'm sorry. This is not a fair industry. This is a very tough industry where you have to learn that, unfortunately, you have to take pay cuts. For example, you're like, oh, well, we got 25%. I'm just lowballing. 25% of the door last night. We're going into this market. We're also getting 25. We also have merch. And on our way back, we have an area where we're already liked and a guarantee. You're making some pretty decent payouts on your way. Stop looking at it as show to show and start looking at it as a collective of shows.
I really like that thinking. Yeah. And 100% agree that a band should not get 75% if they're no name. And what I see a lot for smaller shows, which I'm sure you've done, is like 75% split among the bands. Maybe headliner gets 30, direct support gets 25, and then an opener gets 20. Some kind of split like that. Whereas otherwise, like at the biggest levels, if you're talking amphitheater shows, it might be a versus deal or a plus deal with 90% to the artist.
Or just flat out guarantees.
But that's because they can ask for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a show that I went to last fall, and I can't give too many details because I'm probably not supposed to know this. But it's a band I really like, and they played a relatively small venue for the size that they are, and it sold out immediately. It was the first sellout of the tour. And a lot of the other venues on the tour were much bigger. So I was talking to the promoter for the show, and he's like, yeah, we weren't going to even break even on this show unless it sold out, but we knew it was going to sell out because that was their plan. Like they were saying, in this market, we just want to sell it out quickly and have a quick win so we can say shows are selling out already. And that's what they did. It sold out in like 2 months. And the show was like 8 months after the on sale.
I did something similar a couple years back. There was this band they were on a pretty big label. Like that's a known label. And they were like their new hot commodity on that label. And I was already friends with the guys. And I was like, how about your first ever headliner one-off show? Do it here in McAllen. Because like one of the guys that was supposed to be in the band before he kicked him out is from here. We look at you guys like hometown guys. Why don't we just do it here? And they're like, cool. They called the label owner, their book agent, like, hey, we know this is not in the plan, but we want to do this. So I was like, okay, pre-sale tickets are sold out. And it's like, yeah, but I really didn't make as much pre-sale tickets as you think. I'm like, look, I'm going to make very low pre-sale, say it's sold out and build a pipe. And they're like, sounds kind of dickish, but let's do it. It's their first ever one-off headliner. To say they sold out pre-sale the first time out, that looks good on them. Let's do it. And I was like, oh, thank God that worked. We've been friends ever since. Yeah, their drummer went on to join a very big band in this scene, and we're still great friends. And as a band and promoter, if you can like work simultaneously and be cool with each other, the opportunities are endless. Like if someone goes, oh, well, what do you think of this guy? In my head, I'm not going, well, he's good. I'm like, it was really nice to me and a cool guy. Whatever opportunities or references you want from me about their work ethic, I'm going to say nothing but good things.
Absolutely. That's how it goes. It truly is an industry of relationships. While we're on the subject, negotiating offers. Where would you say if a band, let's say they don't have any negotiation power, but they still want to try, what can a band ask for that's not going to piss you off?
Honestly, do not try. Do not. You will not get what you want. You're going to be discouraged. Don't do it. What you should do instead, and I've done this for my project, find a venue at another city that you want to break into, one that's just small enough. Call them yourself. Go, hey, we're blah, blah. You want to be there September 5th? Is the venue available? Yeah, it's available. How much is your rental? We charge $400 a night. But if we provide sound, it's an extra $150. Okay, we'll pay that. Now, what you do from there is go, who are the heavy hitters in this scene that I know can bring a crowd? Then you go, hey, do you want to jump on this? Yeah, we'll jump on it. Okay, well, now let's get these guys. You can give yourself a better time slot so you look like you're like already one of those guys that you're trying to be involved with. If the show does well, people will go, I don't know who they were, but they were awesome. They were playing with Burial Ground, who's so big in this scene and blah, blah. Then after that, you go, hey, well, the iron's still hot. Let's find who the local promoter is, call him and go, we played at this place with blah, blah, and blah, blah, and blah, blah. And the show did well. We have pictures. We have this. And they'll go, yeah, okay, well, it sounds like they already have the crowd on their side. That's less risk on my part. Let's move forward with it.
Yeah, I love that. Stepping into the promoter role is one of the best things you can do if you don't have an in a market. That's so cool. I like that you mentioned taking pictures of the crowd too, because I always say like, make a sheet of every show you've ever played to have your history, have your attendance, your drop, all that stuff, which for bands that don't have one, I have a free template. You can go to bandhive.rocks/history and you can copy that template. It's just a Google sheet with some really cool like stat tracking stuff built in and use that to track your shows. But Derek, I'm going to have to add in a field that's like link to photos or something like that so people can drop in links for that specific show as proof. There's going to be an update coming to that sheet at some point soon.
Nice.
Before this episode comes out, because this is in like a month and a half, so adding a column should be done well before then. But yeah, so I think that's a good way to also transition into if a band is going to promote their own shows, what are some common mistakes you see promoters make that bands should avoid when they're stepping into that role?
Man, where to begin? First, again, be self-aware. For example, this band does really well here. Yeah, but you guys are an indie band, they're a hardcore band. We're in a cool spot where we can mix those two scenes now, but also don't be the only indie band on like this crazy black metal show either. Even if the black metal show is like, that's what does great in that market, have the self-awareness to know who does not fit with who, because that does matter. And I've seen like locals throw their own shows and make that same mistake. And then it's like, this show was weird. Yeah, the first half was packed. And then once this weird indie band came, all the black metalers left. They're like, oh, it's because they don't support us. Like, no, that's just, they're not into that. And that's okay.
It's not for everyone. Music is so subjective. And I doubt there's anyone in the world who loves all types of music. They might say that, but they don't. But yeah, I think that's a really good tip is like, make sure that those heavy hitters you're reaching out to are in fact a good match. And also that they're good people. There's definitely bands in every scene that can bring a bunch of people, but their personality just sucks.
Oh, yeah. I broke up a band that way.
You broke up a band?
Just for preface, I got very, very lucky in my upbringing. I did not come from a musical family. A lot of people that stepped into stuff are like, I grew up with my parents putting on records my whole life. They were in bands and played guitar. My dad's a football coach. My uncle was in football. My younger brother was in football. My younger sister was a cheerleader. So right away, when I get those like musical egos, I'm like, bro, I do not care who you think you are. I don't care. So there was this one band and I'd be like, hey, their name alone on a flyer guaranteed a good crowd every time without fail. So I said like, hey, do you want to jump on this show? Like, we'll do it for 80. Dude, I'll pay you guys 100. That goes back self-aware. I'm aware that your guys' following is so strong. I can give you more than what you're offering because I'm going to make it back just with your name alone. So whatever you need, let's do this to make this successful. Terrible people, just the worst people you'd ever meet in your life. Just assholes, man. Complete jerks. I'd be like, hey, it's a good show night. Oh, thanks. I'm like, I kind of like this fucking dude's attitude. I had this headliner come down from like Sumerian Records. And so we're talking, we're getting along, everything's going great. And they're like, hey, we need this, this, and that. And the front man of the band that at the time was like gaining so much hype was like, hey, I don't know you guys, but maybe it's not a good move to like talk shit to your promoter because he kind of decides whether or not you guys get on the show. We're the headliner, and even we know that this is his show, and he's doing us a favor by even hiring us tonight. So maybe don't be jerks. They took that as combative. So as more time went on, they were like openly talking shit. And I was like, you know what? You guys aren't on any fucking shows anymore, ever again.
And I'm sure you talked to every other promoter in your city as well.
I did. And they all said the same thing. They bring a crowd, but they're full of ego. And I said, you know what? Why are you putting up with this shit? We're doing them the favor. If we don't book them to play, they don't fucking play. And they forgot that. So we're not booking them. A couple months later, they broke up due to inactivity. Be nice to your promoters.
That is so harsh, but I am in full support of it. That's the kind of band that shouldn't grow, but they do because people don't have the guts to stand up to them. So I'm really glad that you did and you put your foot down and said, nope.
I grew up in almost a frat mentality households where like, you talking shit, bro? That's my strength as a promoter is I'm like, I don't care what this dude thinks. Post up, bro. Which some people don't like, but you know what? It shows results.
That reminds me, there's this band that I've mentioned on the podcast before. So you've probably heard the story, but they were just total jerks. Later, I heard from another band that same band has done this at different shows. And I booked that other band again. And then they were telling me that they heard from a third band that the other band is full of jerks. I have one friend who kind of defended them. And now I'm like, so they're friends with this one person who is a good person. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But the band is just like pissing everybody off in multiple states throughout New England. That's not going to go well. And I know I'm never going to book them. And I'm probably not going to go to shows that they're playing, even if a band I really like is on the bill. And if I know the promoter, I'm absolutely going to tell them, I would love to come to this show. I'm not coming because they are on this bill. Good luck. I think they're going to be a nightmare. I've heard from so many different people that they are. And I'm just not going to support it. So just know that this band is actively losing you people coming through that door.
Absolutely.
It's so frustrating. So I'm really glad that you said, that's enough, we're done. How did the show go in the end with the Sumerian band?
It went really well. We're still good friends. I mean, that band, they haven't disbanded, but they've gone through so many lineup changes. And that first lineup, I still talk to all of them. One, they were all really, really nice guys. The show had some hiccups, and any promoter would tell you every show will have hiccups. They rolled with it. I was like, hey, this happened. I'm so sorry. They're like, that's cool. I'll go fix it right now. Yeah, take your time, man. Before they even left, I was like, how soon can I have them back?
That's the thing you want. If you're in a band, you want to leave that lasting impression of, hey, this person's just super easy to work with. And on that note, we do have an episode. I did an interview with my friend Troy Millette. It was way back on episode 83, booking and playing 150 plus shows a year while working a day job, Troy Millette in the Fire Below. If anyone wants to listen to that, it's bandhive.rocks/83. And we talked about exactly what you're saying about just like, there's a hiccup, you don't have a hissy fit, you don't have a meltdown. You say, okay, cool. Can we help with anything? Can we make your life easier somehow? Maybe you would come back and say, hey, yeah, would you mind skipping your sound check? I know that sucks, but like, we'll be able to get things moving a lot quicker if you're okay with that. And the band goes, yeah, sure, we can do that. We have in-ears anyway, so like, we don't care about the monitors, and we trust your front of house person to just get a good mix going when we walk up there. Simple as that.
Yeah, it's true. And those are the ones that before they leave were always like, I don't care if I lost money on the show. I want to bring them back and make it a bigger one for them. Because I lost money on that show and I was still like, I want these guys back. I owe money now, but hanging out with them was fun.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing where like another like kind of local artist trope I see is the band who says, well, we never get the opportunities. Why does this other band get opportunities? We're so much better than them. It's like, that's why you literally answered your own question. Because, Derek, like you said, you want to help the band that was nice. Doesn't mean they were the best band on the bill, but they were nice. They were respectful. They helped you out by putting that other band in their place.
They didn't have to.
Yeah, exactly. Like they could have just sat silently by and watched and been like, oh, that guy's a jerk, but not said anything.
The drummer for that band is now drumming in Bad Omens. And I really feel like his attitude, his easy to work with demeanor, and just him being one of the coolest dudes is what, in part, along with great songwriting, got that band so big. Was that Nick from Bad Omens, to this day, we don't talk as often, not because of ego, just because, you get older. So easy to work with, so cool, so understanding of small hiccups. That's why he is so successful, because music is about the hang.
Yeah. And that's also just part of being a true professional. If you want to be a professional in the industry, you need to know what you're doing and be able to do it in any circumstance. The show must go on. Oh, they didn't have your hibiscus-infused coconut water? Who cares? Drink some Dasani. And I specifically call it Dasani because it's the worst tasting bottled water there is. But you know what? If you just need hydration when you're on stage...
Yeah, that same show, the marquee was misspelled and a letter fell off.
Oh, no. So it was misspelled before the letter fell off.
And then it fell off. And they were still like, no, we had fun. This was a good time. I'm like, no shrieking way. I thought like, oh my God, I'm going to get a call from their agent tomorrow. I'm going to get scolded at. It's been one of those situations. They're like, this was fun. Thanks for having us, man. Really, like they stayed at my place and just had a good time. And then like Nick, who's now in Bad Omens, is like, I've never had Whataburger before. And I was like, dude, they were so cool and nice last night. Before everyone woke up, I just out of my pocket, here's a shitload of like Whataburger breakfast. Here you go, man. Go nuts. You guys were so cool. I want to do this for you guys. Despite the fact that I'm losing money even today now so if you want to be a band that gets booked consistently, just be nice to your promoters, because your promoter does not care who you think you are. We really don't.
Oh yeah. The promoters heard it from so many hundreds or thousands of acts that it's just like, whatever. And to be honest, I'm sure you've recognized that all the acts kind of blend together unless they were ridiculously mean or ridiculously nice. Anyone middle of the road, just forgotten in 6 months. And you don't want to be remembered for being mean.
No, you don't. I booked so many bands that like, there's some bands I look at and I'm like, that name sounds familiar. Did I book them?
Yep.
Maybe. I don't know. But then there's some where I'm like, oh, I know who those guys are. Oh. Then there's some where I'm like, I did book them and they were great. Like, even if I don't remember them, I'm still like, no, I booked them before. Yeah, bring them back. Why not? Yeah, let's check it out. It doesn't hurt to just be that either. In fact, if I don't remember, it's probably better.
As long as there's not a negative connotation around the band. If there is, that's brutal. So picking up back up with negotiation, where we're saying don't negotiate when you're starting out. And I think for the artists who are ready to negotiate, they know that, so we can move on from there.
If you're ready to negotiate, there's a chance I reach out to you first.
Oh, very true. Yeah, that's a great point. How often would you reach out to artists from other markets?
A lot.
A lot. Okay. And so you're just kind of reaching out saying, hey, if you're working on a tour that comes through Texas in the next 6 to 12 months, let me know and let's try and set something up. Or how would you go about that process?
That's actually a really interesting question. So when I first started and I was booking larger bands, I'd find tours that were already announced. And I'd go, Texas, they have 2 days off. I can probably use one of those off days to bring them here. So you go to their website or their Facebook, and in their Facebook, it would say manager, press, booking. At a band's website, all their info should be there. If you're a band starting out, all of your info should be there. It would say booking agent, blah, blah, at blah, blah agency. And I go, hey, man, I'm a promoter. I'm doing a show. I want to bring them here. And be honest. Honesty goes a long way. I've never done this before. I'm new at this, but I think that they would do really well here, and I'd love to do this. The booking agent that I worked with at the time, he was also in this pretty well-known band as well. He was like, okay, you're new. I'm going to walk you through how this works. Okay, cool. You send the date. You send an offer. He goes, right now, our rate is going to be blah, blah, blah. Let's say, for the sake of argument, 300. In the future, if you're the one reaching out, you should send the offer first. You tell us how much you're willing to pay them, then we negotiate from there. And if you're a band starting out, if you're worth the negotiating, the promoter will reach out to you. If for some reason you're like, well, I have this date on this tour that I need, be ready to lowball. Be like, hey, we really need this date filled on this date. And like you said, it's important on this date in this area. We're looking to get, I was going to put us out with 200, and they'll go, can we do 150 or something? And then they'll go, you know what? We can do 200. Sure. And then from there, you're just got to sell a lot of merch. But it can be done. There's ways to make money on touring. But again, that self-awareness goes a long way. Know your worth in a literal sense.
Yeah. You got your start by looking at those existing tours, filling in off dates. And then I'm sure the agents would start hitting you up saying, hey, we have this artist coming through now.
And then I also got others saying, hey, I heard from so-and-so, you're the guy to reach to for this market. We've never worked together. We're looking for this much. Do you think you can do that? And I was still very new. And I told them, look, I'm going to be honest. I don't think I can. If we can lower it to this much, it's going to be a bit of a stretch, but I can do that. Sometimes they'll go, we're really looking for this much anyway, so maybe next time. Or they'll go, you know what? Let's work with that. But you have to be willing to work with people. If you're a band going, we want 300, and they're like, we're not getting you 300, then don't be like, oh, well, to hell with you then. We didn't get what we wanted. Be like, well, what can we do? Let's build that relationship and build it together.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were doing this, you're talking a lot about guarantees. Did you ever do versus deals, or was that really a thing that you just did flat guarantees or door deals, not a versus or a plus?
I did flat guarantees because I was not aware that those existed. As time went on, I was like, wait, I could have been doing this the whole time. What the hell? How come nobody told me?
Then if the band does well, they have the opportunity for more. They're more likely to say yes, but they also recognize that, hey, at least their gas is going to be covered even if they don't sell anything, which is like worst case scenario.
If you're a smaller band, if you're like a smaller band going to a new market, you can do verse. Like, hey, how about we just do 25% of the door? Sure, why not? That way the promoter's going, what we do is we'll look at it and go, okay, this is going to cost this much, this costs this much, my total's already this. I can make that back, sure. This new band from nowhere now wants 200. No, I don't want to spend that much. Well, what about a door deal? Then we're going, well, if I break even and profit, I can still pay these guys what they need and I can still profit myself because I'm sorry, bands, this is a job. We love music. We want bands to succeed, but we can't just have this weird, expensive hobby where everybody accepts us benefits, especially if you're going to like talk shit to us the whole time.
Right. Be whiny about catering when you didn't advance it. For a lot of promoters, the versus and the plus deal only come in at the larger levels, like DIY, you'll see the guarantees or just a door deal. But there is a lot of advantage that I think would come in if smaller venues did a versus deal. I think probably a lot of the time it doesn't happen just because it's like you do have to get a little more into the accounting when you're doing that.
Like I said, most of my living is doing cover gigs. So I go on the road for weeks at a time doing cover gigs. And I had this one residency in Austin. Every Monday I was just starting. It was like $75 guaranteed versus 10% of the bar. That gave me the incentive of going, I should promote this. I should find a set list that works, that makes people want to stay. Then it makes me as the artist go, how can I use my skill set to make sure that the bar makes more money? And I had that residency for like 2 years, every Monday for 2 years, because when it came to a versus deal, my automatic thought was, how can I help them? Help me, help you. Together, we started brainstorming ideas like, hey, what if we have these kind of flyers? Then there was a point where on the TV screen, it would show who the artist was, their style, and what days that they were there. We worked on that together. Over time that residency ended, I was kind of burned out. But as a band, if you're saying, let's do versus deals, you have to put in the work. You have to go, what's on our set list? What is this market into? This market's really into heavier stuff. We have faster paced stuff on our set list. Do more of that. Promoters do see when bands put in that extra legroom. I once had a band that big draw, but they put in none of the work. And I told them, you guys are opening tonight. And they were pissed. I said, look, man, you guys didn't promote at all. We tweeted the flyer. I'm like, yeah, today. This show's been announced for like a month. You're opening.
The worst. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're like, but we're the most well-known band. I'm like, dude, I promise you, just from working with you, as you came in, my thoughts were, how long till I get to go home? So I don't care how upset you are. You've already upset me. You're opening.
The bands with a bad attitude, this is the kind of person who goes online and complains about not getting what they deserve. It's like, well, no, you're getting what you deserve because you don't put in the effort. It's not a magic thing like, oh, cool, you can play guitar and you have 3 friends who also play instruments and you make loud noises together. That doesn't mean you deserve anything. You have to provide value. And again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, that value is bringing people into the venue.
Even if that value is a show swap.
Yeah, show swap is great. The people who are there for you see the value as your performance. But from a business perspective, your performance is not the value. And I hate saying that, but yeah, it's 100% true. I also want to touch on a versus deal on the bar sale. That's so cool. I never thought of that. It was always like in my mind, guarantee versus door deal on ticket sales. But if you're not selling tickets, taking a percentage of the bar, that is such a genius idea. I love that.
Dude, I love it too. Those are my lowest paid gigs, but on certain weeks, they make my entire week.
That's especially impressive considering it was a Monday night.
There was some nights I left with 150 plus tips. It's like, we're guaranteeing you 75. Well, I left with 200, say, because I knew how to curate a set list, how to go onto Facebook groups and go, on a Monday, I'll be here. Here's a style of music I'm covering. Here's this and that. And I was like, well, this Monday night, that's just, we expect it to be dead, especially if it's 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock, happy hour. We did well. We're bringing you back again. That's why that residency lasted 2 years. And that's why I was like, well, I can just do this. There was some weeks where I was like, man, I forgot to book more stuff for that week. And I'm going to put in the legwork to make my Monday night gig really good. And bar owners, venues, and promoters look at that.
And that's the kind of thing where like the people who do this stuff recognize it. And the people who don't do this stuff, it just flies over their heads. They have no idea. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that artists make is going back to what you said. They're not self-aware. There's so many ways to not be self-aware. It's really kind of offensive at how much lack of self-awareness there is in the music business.
There was this one local that I was just a huge fan of. I'm like, man, I'm like, hey, can we jump on your show? And I was like, yes, I love this band. I'm so excited. They showed up like an hour late for their set. They're like, you guys just going at this time. Well, just move that now, going at that time. No, absolutely not. All of a sudden, I'm the jerk. They're mad at me. And I'm like, I don't ever want to go to another show these guys are playing again. Now I'm kind of bummed out because I was already a fan. You guys lost a fan.
That kind of attitude. And especially stuff happens. Like if somebody gets a flat tire and they're coming from another state, call, text, do whatever. Get in touch. And if you don't hear back, assume that the message has not been received. Keep trying. Because if you don't keep trying, that's just bad news.
Yeah. Sometimes the message isn't received. Like the amount of times that I later checked my email and I'm like, oh, wow, this went to the spam folder somehow. And I'm like, man, if they had resent it or sent a follow-up, I would have jumped on that so quickly. And vice versa. I've been guilty of the same thing as well, where I'm like, I texted them and I'm like, well, they got the message. And they're like, we didn't get the message. I was like, well, I have no one to blame but myself for that. But I know that because I've been on the promoter side enough times to know that it is my responsibility.
100%. And it happens so often. Like when I am doing production for a show, I give the artist my number. I'm like, if you have any issues day of, here's my number. Do you know how many times I'll get home and see an email from the band that they sent on the way to the show saying, hey, we're going to be 15 minutes late? It's like, I gave you my number for a reason. I don't check my email when I'm working a show. I'm busy doing other stuff. If you text me or you call me, I will see that. But my inbox is so full, I'm not going to see that. That's why you have my number. And honestly, the amount of times bands actually do that instead of emailing me is like probably 1 in 10.
There's been times where my booking agent will be like, here's a couple of dates. And I'm like, hey, I'm in the middle of a show, 3-4 hour gig. During one of my breaks, I'll text you back. For now, hold those dates. And I promise I'll get to you by at least this time by tonight. And they're like, cool. There was one time I just forgot. And they're like, hey, just a quick reminder. I'm like, yeah, I have these. He goes, well, this one's taken, only this one's open. And he goes back to self-aware. I'm like, all right, that's my fault. I should have followed up on that. I know artists who are like, how dare they not hold it for me? It's like, dude, you told me you were going to do it by a certain time. You didn't. That's on you.
Man, I feel like we could probably vent about mistakes that artists make for not just days, but weeks, because we've seen it all. But let's get into some mistakes that promoters might make when working with artists, because you've been on the other side of it too.
I probably made all of them too.
Fair enough. We can talk about mistakes you made or mistakes you saw other promoters make. Up to you.
I will solely do the ones I've made because I know that other promoters will and have made these mistakes. Do not assume you'll make all the guarantee money from the door. Sometimes it works. A lot of times it doesn't. Set a budget aside. And by that, I mean like set a budget saying, well, if I make this much from this show, this much gets put away for the next show. I went through this period where I was like, oh man, I made good money off this. Yeah, let me spend it, enjoy myself. I've earned it. Then it gets to the next show. I'm like, man, how the f am I going to pay for this? Communicate with bands. For each show you do, make a group chat. One, it builds a stronger community. If all the bands and members of the bands are on one group chat, just talking about the show, eventually that turns into sending memes. All of a sudden, the guy from Bloodborne is best friends with the dude from Sega, whatever. Now they're buddies. Now you just built a community. Now they're staying for your set. Make group chats with the band guys. Some of them will think it's really annoying and they'll leave the group chat, but
it's their loss.
It's their loss. Be nice to your promoters. It's really easy to say that you have all the power. Not always true. If you're overly mean to bands, then you'll be like, oh, we're throwing a show on this day. I don't want to fucking be on any show you're throwing. It works both ways.
If people notice that one promoter, I'm thinking of the guy that I was talking about earlier, Scott, if he just puts in so much effort and other promoters just kind of show up, who's going to get booked? The guy that does the effort. Scott's going to get the show if there's a choice.
Exactly. Dude, honestly, man, like I have no problem saying it. I hate my local scene. Hate all of them. This was a couple years back. I was like, you know what? I think the show could do really well. And this was maybe 2016. And I was like, light bulb idea. So I printed out physical flyers. This is when like physical flyers were not a thing at all in like 2016. I printed them out and I'm like, okay, hardcore kids, pop punk kids, let me go to the graphic novel section, manga section of Barnes and Noble. I'm going to put the little flyer sticking out because I know the demographic that's going to be there. I see on Twitter, LOL, who did this? God, it's so dumb. And I'm like, I hate it. The McAllen scene sucks.
But it got noticed.
It did. And now I've seen other people do it. And I'm like, and they're like, yeah, we just don't like him specifically.
Yeah. And obviously, like a small world situation where you saw it there, they might have even known that you were going to see it. That sounds like kind of the vibe.
I'm like, they still go to the shows, whatever. Promoters, scene implosion is a thing. Right now in my local scene, there is a show week after week after week after week. And post-pandemic, the shows were sold out for an all-local bill. And that momentum stayed longer than it should have. But I'm noticing now that the crowds are getting smaller. I'm going to go to this show. Eventually turns into, I'll go to the next one, which turns into, well, there's another one next week. Do not scene implode. I've seen it happen. It is happening in the McAllen scene now. And I tell them that, they get mad at me for saying it, but I'm like, well, your attendance is shit, so.
That's the thing, man. Like on that subject, I've never talked about it as a scene as a whole, but I think you're absolutely right. In fact, I know you're absolutely right. But we have talked about bands who do that by just playing the same market week after week, and it dwindles. And people argue this on TikTok. And I have a case study right here because people will be like, no, that doesn't happen. You can play as much as you want.
No, you can't.
Like what you're doing with that residency, that's fine. But if you're playing originals, you don't want to play the same city every single week. Like I would say 2 to 3 months minimum between shows. There is a band who has played at least every other week in the Burlington scene, but pretty much every week. I love their music. They are so fun live. A friend and I were going to go see their show a couple weeks back, like 2 months ago now by the time this airs. And day of, she texts me and is like, hey, there's a different show at another venue. I just ran into my friend who's their drummer. Like, do you want to go see them instead? Is that okay? I'm like, yeah, sure. We're going to see this other band literally whenever in the next month. That's fine. Whereas if that was the only show they were playing, I'd be like, I really want to see them tonight. Let's go there.
Exactly. No, that's true. Scene implosion's a thing. There's nothing more fun than playing shows. It's my one happy place, my happiest place on earth. But you have to know when to be like, yeah, I don't want to do that day on that day. Or, it's just not a good idea. Like, I would love Ethun to do a bunch of shows week after week. But it's like, well, if I'm going to play in McAllen, I'm not playing there for another 2 months. So you have to find a way to make it work. It sucks, but there's this local band that they play once a year because they're all getting into their 40s and they're incredible band. God, they are so good. And every time they play, I'm like, I need to clear my entire schedule. I'll put it on my calendar. I'm not booking anything that day. I need to see them because they play once or twice a year. Then if you're playing every week, I'll catch them next week.
Yeah, exactly. People just won't show up. We have a similar band who they toured all over the Northeast back in the 80s and made a huge regional name for themselves. And they're still around. It's been 40 years. They do one show in Vermont every single year and they sell out a 750 cap purely based on the fans that they've had for 40 years. It's absolutely amazing.
It's actually similar here. This band, they were on Rise Records. They've done big tours. They were signed to a really good label, skyrocketing, making a name for themselves. And they play here maybe once every 2 years. And they play in a theater and they sell it out every time. Just the announce alone is they're so guaranteed to get a good crowd that I'm like, man, I kind of want to do a show there. How much can I get them as a headliner? Because I know it's guaranteed.
Exactly. That's the kind of thing. The bands who get it are the ones who will do that. They'll be like, yeah, okay, maybe 2 of our friends couldn't make it. We'll play another time so they can see it. But that's going to be in a year or 2. They're not going to be like, oh, our friends couldn't make it. Let's do it again next Saturday. Because guess what? Then your friends are never going to make it. And speaking of oversaturating, I see we're over the hour mark here. So I don't want to oversaturate the market of the podcast and make people's eyes roll back in their head because we've been venting at them for an hour. This has been a great chat. I love it.
I just want to say one last thing, and I feel this is the most important thing. Offer show swaps. I'll tell you how this works and why it works. promoters have this weird tendency of taking a local band and making them their personal project. I don't know why we do it, but we'll always find a band and go, I want them to do really well. We'll put them on everything that's worth being put on. So if you're like, hey, we don't have any numbers here, but if you book us October 8th, we'll bring them to our market October 10th. And now they're going, yes, bring fuel to the fire that is my little local project. And they're guaranteed to book you. I don't know why it is, just we do that.
Yeah, show swaps are such a good idea, but the pet project thing is news to me. That is very valuable information.
I don't know why we do it. Every promoter would say, yeah, we have this one band I really like. I think they could be great. So I put them on like all my big stuff.
That's got to be the situation where just they like the music, they like the people, they're easy to work with. That's how you become the pet project. That's what you got to do. Well, Derek, thank you so much, man. This has been a blast. Before we go, I just want to make sure that people know everything about you to find you. So you are at Ethun Hawk on all socials, but that's Ethun with a U, ETHUNHAWK. And then your personal is at _ Derek Flores. That's DEREKFLORES. Green Light is out now, just recently dropped. And you also have Crossfire and Bittersweet singles from earlier this year and end of last year. Anywhere else you want to send people? Anything else you want to drop as final words of wisdom? Anything like that?
Follow James. You already are. But if I post on mine, follow James. For as long as I've known the dude, he's never given bad advice. And if you think he's giving bad advice, then you have an ego and you need to chill it out. Because I promise you, he will make you successful.
Oh, man, you are too kind. Derek, thank you so much. It's been a blast talking with you, and I'm looking forward to doing this again in the future. We can vent some more about artists and egos. Derek, thank you, man. Have a great day.
And have a good one, brother.